Hey guys, it's Koren. So beautiful. I wanted to film outside today, so I hope the lighting works. So today's video is about inner conversations. I am doing a series on inner conversations, a few video clips where I cite different books where Neville Goddard talks about inner conversation and how they shape our world. So let's get into the video. This book is The Power of Awareness, which is one of my favorite books, and chapter 7 is entitled Attitude, and he talks about how our assumptions shape the world. So I'm going to read some excerpts. First, let's talk about assumptions. Your assumption is the hand of God molding the firmament into the image of that which you assume. Your assumption is the hand of God molding the firmament into the image of that which you assume. The assumption of the wish fulfilled is the high tide which lifts you easily off the bar of the senses where you have so long lain stranded. It lifts the mind into prophecy in the full right sense of the word. And if you have that controlled imagination and absorbed attention, which is possible to attain, you may be sure that all your assumptions implies will come to pass. Your particular relationship to another influences your assumptions with respect to that other and makes you see in him that which you do see. If you can change your opinion of another, then what you believe of him cannot be absolutely true, but is only relatively true. The following is an actual case history illustrating how the law of assumption works. One day, a costume designer described to me her difficulties in working with a prominent theatrical producer. She was convinced that he unjustly criticized and rejected her best work, and that often he was deliberately rude and unfair to her. Upon hearing her story, I explained if she found the other rude and unfair, it was a sure sign that she herself was wanting, and it was not the producer, but herself that was in need of a new attitude. I told her of the power of this law of assumption, and its practical application could be discovered only through experience, and that only by assumption that the situation was already what she wanted. Only by assumption that the situation was already what she wanted, that she could prove that she could bring about a change desired. Her employer was merely bearing witness, telling her by his behavior what her concept of him was. I suggested that it was quite probable that she was carrying on conversations with him in her mind, which were filled with criticism and recrimination. There was no doubt that she was mentally arguing with the producer, for others only echo that which we whisper to them in secret. I want to repeat that again. There was no doubt that she was mentally arguing with the producer, for others only echo that which we whisper to them in secret. I asked her if it was not true that she talked to him mentally, and if so, what those conversations were like. She confessed that every morning on her way to the theater, she told him just what she thought of him in a way that she would never dare to address him in person. The intensity and force of her mental argument with him automatically established his behavior towards her. She began to realize that all of us carry on mental conversation, but unfortunately, on most occasions, these conversations are argumentative, that we only have to observe the passerby on the street to prove this assertion. that so many people are mentally engrossed in conversation and few appear to be happy about it. But the very intensity of their feeling must lead them quickly to the unpleasant incident they themselves have mentally created by that conversation, and therefore must now encounter. When she realized what she had been doing, she agreed to change her attitude and to live this law faithfully by assuming that her job was highly satisfactory and that her relationship with her producer was a happy one. To do this, she agreed that before going to sleep at night on her way to work and at other intervals throughout the day, she would imagine that he had congratulated her on her fine designs and that she in turn had thanked him for her praise and her kindness. To her great delight, she discovered for herself that her own attitude was the cause of all that befell her. The behavior of her employer miraculously reversed itself, his attitude echoing, as it always had done, that which she assumed now reflected her changed concept of him. What she did by the power of her imagination, her persistent assumption, influenced his behavior and determined his attitude towards her. With the passport of desire on the wings of a controlled imagination, she traveled into the future of her own predetermined experience. Thus we see it is not facts, but that which we create in our imagination, which shape our lives. For most of the conflicts of the day are due to the want of little imagination to cast the beam out of our own eye. It is the exact and literal minded who live in a fictitious world. As this designer, by her controlled imagination, started the subtle change in her employer's mind, so can we, by the control of our imagination and wisely directing feelings, solve our problems. By the intensity of her imagination and the feeling, the designer casts a sort of enchantment on her producer's mind and calls him to think that his generous praise originated with him. Often our most own elaborate and original thoughts are determined by another. So I just wanted to speak on that really quickly. We are all having inner conversations with ourselves about our life, about our relationships, and sometimes, all the time, something can happen and we make an assumption about it. So maybe this costume designer, maybe he didn't like maybe one costume that she designed, and then she in turn perceived him as someone that was rude and ungrateful, and then she went on to have these conversations in her head, and that is what she reaped. The conversations that we have in our mind with other people, that is what determines the relationship. It echoes. As Neville says, others only echo that which we whisper to them in secret. So if you want to change a relationship, whether it's your relationship with money, your employer, your spouse, your friend, your family, your kids, start to carry on mental conversations of the way you want it to be, and you will feel an internal shift. I have done this, and I have changed a very negative relationship with an employer to one that turned into praise, and to where this employer literally just loved all the work that I produced, and it just was dramatic. One way that I implemented this was by writing down all the things that I was just so appreciative about this employer. Instead of thinking about the negative things, I just wrote a list of everything that I was so thankful for. I actually, at the time, I didn't know anything about Neville Goddard or anything about inner conversations, but I was having these very bad conversations in my head with him all the time, and that is what was reflected in our relationship. When I began to shift my thoughts about this person to all the positive things that this employment had brought me, it was miraculous. Like, my salary doubled and then tripled, and I was given so many more opportunities, and to the point where it was just ridiculous. And I know that it started with a change in me. Our external world is a reflection of our internal world, and our inner conversations are so powerful because they are really just going before us and really just almost energetically shaping what we think about someone and how we feel about them. And our feelings are electric and magnetic. Our thoughts are electric and our feelings are magnetic. So that which we're creating with our feelings is magnetizing it back to us. So make sure you watch the second video, because I am going to cite more info where Neville talks about inner conversations. Oh, be sure to make sure you subscribe and hit the like button.